Hi, welcome to another lesson with Dr. Hill. What we're doing today is genetics. We're in our National 5 biology course, and what we're going to look at today is how to solve a genetics problem from the 2019 exam. So, National 5 exam, that is. So let's have a look at the question. Now, it's really important to read the whole question first before you do any work, because you may find that you do a lot of unnecessary work unless you do that. So and that's actually a good case here. This question is a good case in point. So always read the complete question, find out what you have to do before you start doing any work. So an experiment was carried out to investigate stem height in pea plants. The parental phenotypes were tall and dwarf as shown in the diagrams. Well, there's a couple of unnecessary diagrams to show us a tall plant and a short plant. Fair enough. The parent plants were both homozygous. When they were crossed, the F1 generation were all tall. Okay, these plants were then crossed with each other to produce the F2 generation. Okay, well, if all the F1 generation were all tall, we know that the homozygous phenotype of the tall plant was a dominant allele, and we know that the other one was recessive. Okay, so we're thinking as we're going, but we want to make sure we read the whole question so that we don't do any unnecessary work. Explain what is meant by the term homozygous. Okay, well, we can answer that. No problem. We'll come back to that in a minute. The dwarf characteristic is recessive. Fair enough. They're telling us this. We have to explain why. Using the information given, explain how this is known. Okay, well, we've already argued that, so we should be able to do that quite quickly. Let's go over the page. The expected ratio in the F2 generation was 3 tall to 1 dwarf. Calculate the expected number of tall plants if there were 144 plants produced in this generation. Okay, they tell us the ratio, and we have to work out what the numbers of each plant are. But that seems easy enough. The results obtained in the F2 generation differed from the expected results. The actual results were 90 tall and 36 dwarf plants. Calculate the simplest whole number ratio for these results. Well, that's just a maths question. This is just a maths question. Right, they've given us the ratio. Do we need to work it out? Do we need to be writing Punnett squares or drawing Punnett squares in this? No, we do not. We don't want to waste our time doing any of that. What we want to do first is explain what is meant by the term homozygous. All right, homozygous means both alleles of the gene are the same. Okay? You can't write both genes are the same because there's only one gene. You must write that both alleles of the gene are the same. That's how you get the mark for that one. Okay. The next question was, the dwarf characteristic is recessive. Using the information given, how do we know this? Explain how this is known. Okay. Well, when the two homozygous plants are crossed, the tall phenotype is dominant. All the offspring are tall. Therefore, the dwarf must be recessive. Let's write it down. When the plants were crossed, the F1 generation were all tall. The allele carried by the tall plants must be dominant. Therefore, the dwarf characteristic is recessive. So that's right for one. If you can think of a way of writing it more succinctly than that, that's fine. Go ahead. Right, next, let's move over to the question. Now, we haven't had to do any Punnett squares. We haven't had to work anything out particularly yet, but now we're going to be given some numbers. So the expected ratio in the F2 generation was 3 tall to 1 dwarf. Yeah, well, you can work it out if you want, but it's done for you. Calculate the expected number of tall plants if there were 144 plants produced in this generation. Okay, well, we have to look at this as a whole. So what is, we have to divide this number up into 4 parts. 3 of them are going to be here and 1 of them is going to be here, right? So we divide that number up into 4 parts, 3 here, 1 here. Okay, so you add those 2 numbers together and then divide that number by those. So simplest thing, 144 divided by 4 equals, well, that's going to be 36 because I did it in my head, but you can do it with a calculator if you want. So therefore, how many tall plants have we got? Well, 36 we have the dwarf plants, that's 1 part of that. 3 parts of that is going to be 36 times 3. 36 times 3 equals 108. 108. Just check your answer, make sure it makes sense. 108 is definitely smaller than 144. Looks 3 times bigger than 36. So it looks like I put the right numbers into the calculator. All right, fine. The last thing we have to do is this question here. The results obtained in the F2 generation differed from the expected results. The actual results were 90 tall and 36 dwarf plants. Calculate the simplest whole number ratio for these results. All right. You might never have been taught this in your biology, how to calculate these ratios. This is a maths question. But there is a kind of a shortcut to this because the ratio is not going to be too complicated. What we have to do is find the highest common factor between the two numbers, between these two numbers, 90 and 36. So start with your small number, okay? Because the highest common factor for this, but these two numbers has to be something lower than 36. So start with working out your highest factors. So the highest factor we have for 36 is 36 itself. 36 times 1 is 36. Now, is 36 a factor of 90? So 90 divided by 36 gives us 2.5. No, it's not. So our next factor is going to be that number divided by 2. So 18, the next factor is 18. So is 18 a factor of 90? Oh, hang on. 90 divided by 18 equals 5. Okay, yes, so 18 is a factor of 90. So highest common factor equals 18. That's between 90 and 36. So therefore there are dwarf equals 36 divided by 18, which equals 2. And tall equals 90 divided by 18, which equals 5. And there's your question done. Now, there are mathematical ways of calculating highest common factor, but that's a relatively simple way of doing it. We're not going to get very complicated numbers in these kind of questions. So, but if you must do it with stringing out your prime factors, then by all means do it that way. Do it the way you were taught in maths if you know how to do it. So that's the end of that. I hope that was helpful. And that took 8 minutes and 38 seconds. The question shouldn't take you as long as that because I was explaining as I went. But anyway, if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. And otherwise, I'll see you for another problem in the future.